My brother used my Sims game to frame me for murder. I was torturing my brother's ex in The Sims when a SWAT team raided my home. 3 hours later, I learned my own brother had set the whole thing up. The battering ram hit my bedroom door so hard my monitor shook. They yanked me from my chair, slammed me face first into my desk, zip-tied my wrists behind my back. My parents' screams from downstairs cut through everything. The lead detective looked at me with disgust. Bastian Reyes has been missing for 48 hours. You're our prime suspect. I didn't even know Bastian was missing. He was my older brother Ryan's best friend growing up. They'd had a falling out last year, something about money, and Ryan had been obsessed with revenge ever since. The detective pulled out her phone and started reading my text messages. Except they weren't my words. Just trapped him in a room with no doors, watching him pee himself and cry. "That's from The Sims!" I screamed. "It's a video game." She kept reading. "Setting the kitchen on fire next. Deleted all the smoke alarms so he can't escape. Someone else sent those, like that's not me." But my phone was in evidence. My phone number, my account. They showed my parents the messages. Mom's hand went to her mouth. Dad's face drained of color as he looked at me like he'd never seen me before. They bagged my computer, my phone, everything. An officer photographed my desk where someone had drawn death scenarios labeled Bastian dies. I didn't draw those. The handwriting wasn't even mine. But nobody was listening. They held me for 72 hours. My lawyer finally got me released when the forensics came back. The text messages had been sent from a spoofed device. The drawings were traced to a left-handed person. I'm right-handed. That's when I started putting it together. Ryan had given me The Sims for my birthday 3 months ago. Insisted I play it. Kept asking me to make characters of people we knew. "Make Bastian," he'd laughed. "Show me what happens when he drowns." I'd thought he was joking. Dark humor about an ex-friend. The police found Bastian's body 2 weeks later. He'd been dead before I was even arrested, hidden in a storage unit Ryan had rented under a fake name. The murder weapon had my fingerprints on it, a kitchen knife that had gone missing from our house months ago. My hairbrush, the one Ryan borrowed once to fix his costume for Halloween. Strands of my hair at the crime scene. My old student ID that I'd lost last year. Found in Bastian's apartment. Everything pointed to me. Everything except the timeline, which proved I was at work when Bastian died. Ryan cracked during interrogation. Not out of guilt, out of frustration that his plan hadn't worked. "She was supposed to go to prison," he told the detectives. "She got everything, the good grades, the scholarships, Mom and Dad's attention. I wanted her to lose something for once." He'd spent 18 months planning it, befriended Bastian again just to have a victim who connected to both of us. Stole my belongings over time, created fake text trails, planted evidence. He killed a man just to frame me. Our parents visit him in county jail every week. They've hired him an expensive lawyer. They tell me it's because he's sick and needs help, and we can't abandon our own son. They've never once apologized to me. Last week, Mom asked if I could move past this so the family could heal together. She wants me to write a letter supporting Ryan's mental health defense. "He's your brother," she said. "Family forgives family." I looked at this woman who'd watched me get dragged out in handcuffs, who'd believed I was capable of murder, who now wanted me to help the person who tried to destroy my life. "He killed someone to hurt me," I said. "And you want me to forgive him?" "He didn't actually hurt you. The charges were dropped." I was in jail for 3 days. I lost my job. My boyfriend left me. My face was in the newspaper as a murder suspect. I have panic attacks every time someone knocks on my door. "But you're fine now." I'm not fine. I have nightmares about the SWAT team, about zip ties, about my father's face when he thought I was a killer. I see a therapist twice a week for PTSD that my parents think I'm exaggerating. Ryan's trial is next month. The prosecution wants me to testify. My parents want me to stay silent. "Think about what it would do to our family," Mom said. "Think about Ryan's future." I think about it every day. I think about how my brother spent 18 months planning to destroy me. How my parents chose him anyway. How I'm supposed to forgive and forget because family means never holding anyone accountable. The prosecutor asked what I want. I want my brother to spend the rest of his life in prison. I want my parents to choose me, just once. I know I'll only get one of those. I looked at Nadia across her desk and told her exactly what I wanted. Ryan needed to spend the rest of his life in prison. I wanted to testify at his trial and make sure everyone heard what he did. Nadia leaned forward and held my eyes with hers. She said that was exactly what she needed to hear from me. We were going to make sure Ryan faced full consequences for everything he did to me and to Bastian. Her voice was steady and certain in a way that made me believe her. She pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes about my availability for prep meetings. I felt something shift inside me, like I'd finally made a choice that was mine instead of what my family wanted. That night, my phone started buzzing at 11. Mom's name lit up the screen 6 times in a row. I let each call go to voicemail and then listened to the messages with my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. The first message was her crying about how I was destroying the family. The second one called me selfish and ungrateful. By the 6th message, she was screaming that I was abandoning my own brother when he needed me most. I played each voicemail twice, feeling my chest get tighter with every word. Then I texted my therapist, Rhea, like she'd told me to do if my parents contacted me. She texted back immediately telling me to block Mom's number right now, tonight, before I went to sleep. I stared at my phone for 10 minutes before I finally did it. 2 days later, someone pounded on my apartment door at 7 in the morning. I looked through the peephole and saw Dad standing in the hallway holding a coffee cup. He knocked again and called my name. I put the chain lock on and opened the door just wide enough to see his face. He started begging me to reconsider testifying against Ryan. His voice cracked and he said Ryan was still my brother no matter what happened. I told him through the gap in the door that he made his choice when he hired Ryan, an expensive lawyer, but never once apologized to me for thinking I was a killer. He tried to push the door open, but the chain held. I said I was making my choice now just like he made his. Then I closed the door and listened to him stand there for 5 more minutes before he finally left. My first meeting with Nadia to prepare for testimony happened 3 days after that. She sat me down in her office conference room with a recorder and a box of tissues. She needed me to walk through every single detail of the arrest, all the evidence Ryan planted, every manipulation he used on me. I started talking about the SWAT team breaking down my door and got about 10 minutes in before my chest started hurting. The room felt too small and too hot. My vision got spotty around the edges. Nadia grabbed a paper bag from her desk drawer and helped me breathe into it in her office bathroom while I sat on the floor. She didn't make me feel weak or dramatic about it. She just waited until I could breathe normal again, and then asked if I wanted to try again tomorrow instead. Nadia's husband Troy called me 2 days later and introduced himself as a victim advocate. He said Nadia told him I was having a rough time with the trial prep, and he wanted to check in with me weekly to help me handle the stress of it all. We met for coffee, and he asked me about my PTSD symptoms, without making me feel like I was being dramatic or exaggerating. He was the first person who treated what happened to me like it was real trauma instead of something I should just get over. He told me about other victims he'd worked with who had similar reactions to being arrested. Hearing that I wasn't alone or crazy made something loosen in my chest. I actually started believing that my panic attacks and nightmares were a normal response to an abnormal situation. A week later, Nadia's assistant brought me an envelope that had been forwarded through their office. Inside was a letter from Colton McFadden, Bastion's younger brother. His handwriting was neat and careful. He thanked me for agreeing to testify and said his family needed to see justice for Bastion. He wrote that knowing I was willing to face Ryan in court gave them hope that Bastion's death wouldn't be forgotten or dismissed. He said they understood how hard this must be for me, and they were grateful I was being brave enough to do it anyway. I read the letter 3 times sitting in my car in the parking lot of Nadia's office building. Reading Colton's letter made something click in my brain that hadn't before. This wasn't just about me and what Ryan did to me anymore. Ryan murdered an actual person with a family who loved him and missed him every day. I'd been so focused on my own pain and my own trauma that I almost forgot he took someone's entire life away. Bastion had parents and a brother and friends, and a future that Ryan stole just so he could hurt me. The weight of that hit me different from it had before. I wasn't just testifying to get revenge on Ryan or to make my parents finally see what he was. I was testifying because Bastion's family deserved to see his killer face consequences. In my next therapy session, Rhea asked me what scared me most about testifying. I admitted that seeing Ryan's face again terrified me because I'd have to remember that he was my brother, who I used to trust completely. She helped me work through the fact that the brother I trusted never actually existed in the first place. That person was always capable of killing someone and framing me for it. The Ryan I thought I knew was just a mask he wore around me. Understanding that helped somehow, like it gave me permission to stop mourning the brother I lost, because I never really had him to begin with. 3 weeks before the trial, Nadia called me into her office for an emergency meeting. Ryan's lawyer, Maximus O'Neill, had contacted her with a new plea offer. Ryan would plead guilty to second-degree murder if I agreed not to testify about the framing and evidence planting. Nadia spread the paperwork across her desk and told me it was completely my choice whether to accept it or not. But she also said the fact that they were offering this deal proved they were scared of what I'd say on the stand. My testimony about Ryan's 18-month plan to destroy me would make him look calculated and cruel instead of mentally ill and impulsive. They wanted to shut me up. I told Nadia I was rejecting the plea deal before she even finished explaining it. I needed Ryan to face what he did to me, not just what he did to Bastian. The murder was only half of what he was guilty of. He spent a year and a half stealing my stuff and planting evidence and building a case to send me to prison for life. He watched me get arrested and said nothing. He was willing to let me rot in jail for a crime he committed just because he resented my grades and my scholarships. Nadia smiled when I said no to the deal and told me that was exactly what she hoped I'd say. Now we were going to trial with the strongest case possible, and Ryan was going to face everything he did. I found out later that Mom called my new boss pretending to be worried about me. She said I was going through a mental health crisis, and they should keep an eye on me, because I was making dangerous decisions. My boss, Sarah, pulled me into her office to ask if I was okay, and I had to explain the whole situation while trying not to cry. She was understanding, but I could tell she was worried about workplace drama. 2 days after that conversation, Dad showed up in the parking lot after my shift. I saw his car blocking mine and my stomach dropped. He got out and started yelling before I even reached my vehicle. Other employees were leaving for the day, walking past us, staring. Dad's face was red and he kept saying I was destroying the family, that I had no idea what I was doing to Mom, that Ryan needed me and I was abandoning him when he was sick. I tried to get in my car, but he grabbed my door handle. Sarah must have been watching from the office window because she came running out with 2 security guards. They escorted Dad off the property while he screamed that I was a selfish bitch who cared more about revenge than family. I sat in my car shaking for 20 minutes before I could drive home. Sarah texted me that night saying she understood my situation better now, and I shouldn't worry about my job, but the humiliation of having my coworkers witness that scene made me want to quit anyway. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad's angry face, heard him calling me selfish. My phone buzzed with texts from Mom's number even though I'd blocked her. She must have been using someone else's phone. The messages said I was killing her, that the stress was giving her heart problems, that if anything happened to her, it would be my fault. I turned my phone off completely and sat on my bathroom floor having a panic attack. When I finally calmed down enough to think clearly, I realized I couldn't keep living like this. My parents knew where I worked, they had my phone number, they could show up anywhere. I needed to cut them off completely, or they would never stop. The next morning, I went to the phone store and got a new number. I closed all my social media accounts, deleted everything. Then I drove to Nadia's office and told her assistant that my parents were harassing me, and the only people who should have my new contact information were Nadia, Troy, and Rhea. The assistant wrote everything down and promised to keep my information secure. Cutting off my parents felt like cutting off my own arm. They were terrible to me, but they were still my parents, still the people who raised me. Part of me kept hoping they would realize what they were doing and apologize and choose me for once. But Rhea had told me in therapy that I couldn't heal while people kept ripping my wounds open, and that's exactly what my parents were doing every time they contacted me. Troy called my new number 2 days later and asked if I wanted to meet his kids. He said Raymond and Marie had been following the case in the news and wanted to meet me. I was nervous about meeting teenagers who knew about the worst thing that ever happened to me, but Troy promised they were good kids who just wanted to show support. We met at a coffee shop near their house. Raymond was 16 with braces and a superhero t-shirt. Marie was 14 with her hair in braids and paint stains on her jeans. They both hugged me like we were already friends. Raymond told me I was brave for standing up to my family, and he couldn't imagine how hard that must be. Marie said she hoped if something like this ever happened to her, her parents would believe her the way mine didn't. Hearing these kids say out loud what my parents should have done made something crack inside my chest. Troy invited me back to their house for dinner. Nadia was cooking pasta, and the kitchen smelled amazing. Their house was full of family photos and kids' artwork, and it felt warm in a way my parents' house never did. During dinner, I watched how Nadia and Troy talked to their kids. They actually listened when Raymond complained about his math teacher. They apologized when Marie pointed out they'd forgotten about her art show next week. They asked the kids' opinions about family decisions and took their answers seriously. I realized I'd never had parents who treated me like my thoughts and feelings mattered. After dinner, Marie showed me her paintings and Raymond explained his favorite video game. They treated me like a normal person, not a victim or a news story. When it was time to leave, Marie hugged me again and whispered that I could come over whenever I wanted. Troy walked me to my car and said his kids really liked me, and I was welcome anytime. Driving home, I cried because spending one afternoon with the Larson family showed me what I'd been missing my whole life. The next week, Detective Aurora reached out through Nadia's office. She needed to go over my testimony about the arrest itself, so she could testify about the investigation. We met at the police station in a small conference room. Aurora had her case file spread across the table, photos of my bedroom after the raid, reports from that night. She asked me to walk through exactly what happened when SWAT came through my door. I described the battering ram hitting so hard my monitor shook, being yanked from my chair and slammed face down on my desk, the zip ties cutting into my wrists. Aurora took notes and asked specific questions about each officer's actions, what they said, how they treated me. Talking through those memories made my hands shake and my breathing get shallow. Aurora noticed immediately and offered to take a break. She got me water and told me to take my time. When I finally calmed down enough to continue, she said what happened to me that night was traumatic, and I wasn't weak for struggling with it. She explained that SWAT raids are designed to be overwhelming and terrifying, and having that experience when you're innocent makes it even worse. Her validation of my feelings meant more than she probably knew. Before I left, Aurora mentioned something that stuck with me. She said from the beginning something felt off about the case because the evidence was almost too perfect, too convenient. Real crimes are messy and complicated, she explained, but everything pointing to me was neat and organized like someone had carefully arranged it. She said good detective work is about trusting your instincts, and she was glad she kept digging even when everything seemed to point in one direction. Knowing that someone had doubts about my guilt from the start made me feel less alone in what I'd gone through. 1 week before the trial, Nadia set up a mock courtroom in her office conference room. She moved tables around to look like a witness stand and jury box. Troy sat in the corner with a notepad, pretending to be a court reporter. Nadia handed me a stack of papers with potential questions Ryan's lawyer might ask. She told me to read through them first, get familiar with how awful they'd be. I sat at the fake witness stand and read questions like, "Isn't it true you resented your brother's success?" And, "How do we know you didn't plant evidence yourself?" My hands started shaking before we even began. Nadia sat across from me and started the practice session. She asked gentle questions first, walking me through the timeline of Ryan giving me the game, asking me to make characters, the weird comments about Bastian drowning. Then she switched roles and became Maximus, Ryan's defense attorney. Her voice got sharp and accusatory. She asked why I didn't notice Ryan stealing my belongings. She suggested maybe I knew about the plan all along. She questioned whether my PTSD was real or just convenient for the trial. I wanted to cry, but I pushed through it. Every horrible question she threw at me, I answered honestly. I described finding the game under my bed where Ryan left it. I explained that I trusted my brother and didn't think to watch him around my stuff. I talked about the panic attacks and nightmares without apologizing for them. Troy stopped taking fake notes and just watched. After 2 hours, Nadia dropped the hostile lawyer act and became herself again. She looked at me with something like pride and said I did better than most witnesses she'd worked with. After the practice session ended, Nadia poured me water and sat down next to me instead of across from me. She said I was going to be an excellent witness because I didn't try to hide my pain or pretend everything was fine. Juries respond to authenticity, she explained, and everything I'd been through showed in my voice and my face in a way that made my testimony powerful. She told me that Maximus would try to rattle me, make me angry or defensive, but if I stayed honest like I just did, the jury would see through his tactics. Troy added that he'd watched hundreds of witnesses testify, and most of them either got too emotional to speak or too defensive to be believable. I'd found the balance between showing my trauma and staying coherent. Nadia asked if I felt ready for the real thing. I told her I didn't feel ready, but I'd do it anyway because Bastian's family deserved justice and Ryan deserved consequences. She squeezed my shoulder and said that was exactly the right reason to testify. Walking out of her office that day, I felt scared but also stronger than I'd been in months. 3 days before trial, I got a text from someone I hadn't heard from in forever. It was from a mutual friend saying my ex-boyfriend wanted to apologize and asking if I'd be willing to meet him for coffee. I stared at the message for 10 minutes trying to figure out what he could possibly say after abandoning me when I got arrested. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely. But another part was curious what kind of apology he thought would make up for leaving me when I needed him most. I texted back that I'd meet him at the coffee shop near my apartment, neutral territory where I could leave whenever I wanted. The mutual friend responded immediately with a time and place. I spent the next 2 days wondering what I'd say to him, whether I'd yell or stay calm or just walk out. Rhea told me in therapy that I should go with no expectations, just see what he had to say and decide how I felt about it. She reminded me that I didn't owe him forgiveness just because he wanted it. I showed up at the coffee shop 5 minutes early and ordered my drink first so I wouldn't feel trapped. My ex walked in right on time, and behind him was a woman I didn't recognize. She was pretty, put together, and she looked uncomfortable. My ex introduced her as Alina. His girlfriend and I immediately felt weird about the whole situation. Why would he bring his new girlfriend to apologize to me? Before my ex could say anything, Alina stepped forward and apologized for him. She said she made him reach out because what he did was wrong, and she couldn't be with someone who abandoned their partner during a crisis without at least trying to make it right. I just stared at her, trying to process that this stranger cared more about my feelings than my own parents did. Alina told me she would never stay with someone who acted like my ex did, and she needed him to face what he'd done before they could move forward. My ex looked embarrassed and uncomfortable, like a kid being forced to apologize by his mom. My ex stumbled through an apology that was clearly Alina's script, more than his own feelings. He said he was sorry for leaving when I got arrested, that he should have believed me, that he was scared and didn't know how to handle it. His words sounded rehearsed and hollow. I listened to the whole thing without interrupting, watching Alina nod along like she was grading his performance. When he finished, I accepted the apology because I realized I didn't actually care about him anymore. The man who left me when I needed him most wasn't someone worth holding on to, even in anger. I told him I appreciated him saying it, but that we were done, completely done, and I'd moved on. He looked relieved, like he'd been worried I'd yell at him. Alina looked satisfied, like she'd accomplished what she came to do. I finished my coffee and stood up to leave, ready to be done with this weird encounter. Alina stopped me before I could walk out. She asked if there was anything I needed for the trial, and her concern sounded completely genuine. I told her I was fine, I had people supporting me, but I appreciated her asking. She pulled out her phone and said she wanted to give me her number anyway. If I needed someone to sit in the courtroom for support who wasn't connected to the case, she'd be there. She said sometimes it helps to see a friendly face in the crowd, someone who's just there for you. I took her number, surprised that this stranger was offering more support than my own parents ever had. My ex looked confused about why his girlfriend was bonding with his ex, but Alina ignored him. She hugged me before I left and whispered that I was brave for testifying. Walking back to my apartment, I thought about how strange it was that my ex's girlfriend showed me more kindness in 20 minutes than my family had in months. I saved Alina's number in my phone under courtroom support and felt grateful that good people existed in unexpected places. The night before trial started, I couldn't sleep. I tried everything. I took a shower, drank chamomile tea, listened to calm music, but my brain wouldn't shut off. At 2 a.m., I was still wide awake, staring at my ceiling and panicking about walking into that courtroom. I grabbed my phone and called Troy without thinking about how late it was. He answered on the second ring, voice clear like he'd been awake anyway. I apologized for calling so late, but he cut me off and asked what I needed. I told him I was scared, that I kept imagining Ryan's face when I testified, that I didn't know if I could actually do this. Troy talked me down for 40 minutes. He reminded me that I wasn't alone, that Nadia had prepared a case so strong that Ryan wouldn't be able to escape justice, that Bastian's family was counting on me and I was strong enough to do this. He told me to focus on one question at a time, one answer at a time, and not think about the whole testimony at once. By the time we hung up, my breathing had calmed down, and I felt like maybe I could actually get through tomorrow. I finally fell asleep around 3 a.m. and woke up 4 hours later to my alarm. Trial began, and I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, waiting to be called as a witness. The prosecution had other witnesses to call first, building their case before I took the stand. Raymond showed up around 10 a.m., having skipped school to sit with me. He brought his backpack and homework, but mostly he just sat there keeping me company. Marie arrived during lunch with a bag of snacks, chips, and granola bars and candy. She said she figured I wouldn't want to eat real food, but I should have something in my stomach. These kids I barely knew were showing me more family loyalty than my actual family ever did. We sat on the hard wooden bench in the hallway, and they told me about school drama and their weekend plans. Normal stuff that distracted me from what was happening inside that courtroom. Every time the door opened and someone came out, my heart jumped, thinking they were calling me. Raymond noticed and started telling me stupid jokes to keep me from spiraling. Marie shared her earbuds so we could listen to music together. When Troy came out to check on us during a break, he saw his kids on either side of me and smiled like this was exactly what he'd hoped would happen. I was called to testify on the second day of trial. A bailiff opened the courtroom door and said my name, and walking through that door felt like walking toward the edge of a cliff. The courtroom was packed with people. I saw reporters in the back row with notebooks. I saw Ryan sitting at the defense table with Maximus, and he wouldn't look at me. Then I saw Bastian's parents in the front row, and his mom gave me an encouraging smile. Colton sat next to his parents, and he nodded at me like he was saying, "You've got this." I remembered why I was doing this. Not for me, not even mainly for me, but for Bastian, who couldn't speak for himself anymore. I walked to the witness stand, put my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The whole truth. Nothing but the truth. I sat down and looked at Nadia, and she gave me the same calm, confident expression she'd had during our practice session. Nadia's questions started gentle but thorough, walking me through Ryan's 18-month plan to frame me. She asked about the birthday present, and I described how Ryan gave me the Sims 3 months before Bastian disappeared. She asked what happened after that, and I explained how Ryan kept asking me to make characters of people we knew, especially Bastian. I told the jury about the jokes Ryan made, asking me to show him what happened when Bastian drowned in the game, when his character got trapped in a burning house. I described how I thought it was just dark humor about an ex-friend, how I never imagined Ryan was planning something real. Nadia asked about my belongings that went missing, and I walked through each item. The kitchen knife that disappeared from our house months before the murder. My hairbrush that Ryan borrowed for a Halloween costume. My student ID that I thought I'd just lost. I explained how Ryan had access to everything, how I trusted him completely and never thought to watch what he was taking. The jury listened to every word, and I could see some of them taking notes. Nadia moved to her next question and asked about the SWAT raid itself. I described the battering ram hitting my bedroom door, the sound so loud it made my monitor shake on my desk. I told them about being yanked from my chair mid-game, slammed face first into the desk hard enough that I bit my tongue and tasted blood. The zip ties cut into my wrists as they dragged me out of my room. My parents were screaming downstairs, and I could hear my mom crying my name over and over. I looked at the jury as I spoke and saw several of them sitting forward in their seats, paying close attention. One woman in the front row had tears in her eyes. She kept shaking her head slightly like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. I realized in that moment that they were actually listening to me, actually hearing what happened, and it made something loosen in my chest. Nadia asked about the 72 hours I spent in custody after the arrest. I described the holding cell with its metal toilet and concrete bench, the fluorescent lights that never turned off so I couldn't tell if it was day or night. The way Detective Chang looked at me during questioning, her face full of disgust like I was the worst kind of monster. I explained that I didn't even know Bastian was missing when they arrested me. I thought he was just Ryan's ex-friend who lived across town. The confusion of being accused of murder when I didn't even know there had been a murder was terrifying in a way I still couldn't fully explain. I told the jury about sitting in that cell trying to understand what was happening, going over everything in my head, wondering if I was losing my mind. The hardest part came when Nadia asked about my relationship with Ryan before all this happened. I had to admit out loud that we were close, that I trusted him completely, that he was my big brother, and I looked up to him even though he struggled sometimes. I told them about the birthday present, how excited I was when he gave me The Sims because it showed he was paying attention to what I liked. I described how he would come hang out in my room and watch me play, making jokes about the characters. I never saw this coming. Never imagined my own brother was capable of planning something so awful. Saying it out loud in that courtroom made it real in a way it hadn't been before. My voice cracked when I said that Ryan wanted to destroy me, and I had to stop and take a drink of water before I could continue. Then Maximus stood up for cross-examination, and everything got harder. He suggested I was making my trauma sound worse than it really was to gain sympathy from the jury. He asked why I didn't notice Ryan stealing my things if we were so close. He implied that maybe I knew more than I was admitting about what Ryan was planning. His questions came fast and harsh, trying to rattle me and make me slip up. But Nadia had prepared me for exactly this. She'd told me to stay calm, answer honestly, and not let him put words in my mouth. I took deep breaths between answers and kept my voice steady, even when my hands were shaking under the witness stand. Maximus brought up my PTSD and suggested the timing was convenient, that maybe I was playing up my symptoms to make the jury feel sorry for me. I looked him straight in the eye and described my panic attacks in detail. The nightmares where I wake up feeling zip ties on my wrists. The way I jump at loud noises and can't handle unexpected knocks on my door. The times I've had to pull over while driving because my heart started racing and I couldn't breathe. I told him about the hypervigilance, how I'm constantly scanning my surroundings for threats, how I can't relax even in my own apartment. I explained that there's nothing convenient about being afraid in your own home, about losing sleep every night, about having to see a therapist twice a week just to function. My voice got stronger as I spoke because I was angry now, and that anger helped me push through the fear. After 2 hours on the stand, Nadia stood up for redirect, but she didn't ask me any questions. She just told the judge that my testimony spoke for itself. The judge nodded and told me I could step down. As I walked past the defense table, I made eye contact with Ryan for the first time since entering the courtroom. He was looking at me, but the second our eyes met, he looked away. He looked down at the table in front of him. Something shifted inside me in that moment. My brother couldn't even look at me after everything he'd done. He was the one who should be ashamed, not me. I sat in the courtroom gallery for the rest of the trial. Alina showed up the next morning like she'd promised. She slid into the seat next to me and squeezed my hand. During the forensic testimony about the planted evidence, they showed photos of the crime scene. My body started shaking and I couldn't make it stop. Alina noticed and reached over to hold my hand without saying anything. She just sat there with me, this woman who barely knew me, offering support while my own parents sat on the other side of the courtroom pretending I didn't exist. The forensic expert took the stand and walked the jury through Ryan's planning in careful detail. He explained how Ryan collected strands of my hair from the hairbrush he borrowed for his Halloween costume, how he transferred my fingerprints to the murder weapon using clear tape and careful pressure, how he created the fake text messages using a device that spoofed my phone number. The level of thought that went into framing me was staggering. 18 months of collecting evidence, planting items, building a case against his own sister. I watched the jury's faces as the expert testified. Several of them looked disgusted. One man kept shaking his head. They could see how calculated it all was, how much planning Ryan had put into destroying my life. Detective Aurora took the stand and testified about the investigation. She explained that the timeline was what first made her suspicious. I had been at work when Bastian died, with multiple witnesses and security camera footage to prove it. That inconsistency made her dig deeper into all the other evidence. She told the jury that Ryan's mistake was being too thorough. Real crimes are messy. There are gaps and contradictions and things that don't quite add up. But Ryan's frame job was too perfect, too neat, and that perfection made it feel staged. Aurora's testimony was calm and professional, but I could tell she took pride in catching what other investigators might have missed. Ryan's defense attorney brought in a psychiatrist who testified about mental illness. The doctor talked about antisocial personality disorder and lack of empathy. He explained brain chemistry and childhood development. For a while, it seemed like the defense might actually convince the jury that Ryan was sick rather than evil. But then Nadia stood up for cross-examination. She asked the psychiatrist if mental illness prevented someone from knowing right from wrong. The doctor admitted it didn't. She asked if people with personality disorders were capable of planning and executing complex schemes. The doctor said yes. She asked if Ryan's 18 months of careful planning showed he understood what he was doing. The doctor had to agree that it did. By the end of the cross-examination, the mental health defense had fallen apart completely. Nadia walked back to the prosecutor's table and pulled out a black notebook from an evidence box. She held it up so the jury could see the worn leather cover. Ryan's handwriting filled every page with my work schedule, my daily routines, times I left for class and came home. She showed them the rental agreement for the storage unit signed with a fake name 3 months before Bastian disappeared. She displayed the timeline Ryan created, marking off 18 months of preparation with neat check marks next to each completed task. The jury leaned forward to look at the evidence. One woman in the front row shook her head slowly. The man next to her crossed his arms and stared at Ryan with obvious anger. This wasn't mental illness. This was planning. This was someone who knew exactly what he was doing and did it anyway. Colton took the stand the next morning. He wore a dark suit that looked too big on him, like he'd borrowed it from his father. His hands shook as he placed them on the witness stand rail. Nadia asked him to tell the jury about his brother. Colton's voice cracked when he started talking. He said Bastian volunteered at an after-school program for kids who needed help with homework. Bastian wanted to be a teacher someday. He loved working with children who struggled in the school because he'd struggled too when he was younger. Colton described how Bastian would stay late to help kids who had trouble reading, how he bought school supplies with his own money for students whose families couldn't afford them, how he made every kid feel important and smart. Then Colton explained what really happened between Ryan and Bastian. There was no falling out over nothing. Ryan had stolen money from Bastian. Over $5,000 from Bastian's savings account. Bastian found out and told Ryan he had 1 week to return the money, or he was going to the police. Ryan killed him 6 days later. The motive clicked into place. Ryan didn't kill Bastian because of some old friendship gone wrong. He killed Bastian to avoid fraud charges. And he framed me because he was jealous and angry and wanted me to suffer too. 2 birds with 1 stone. Get rid of the person who could send him to prison and destroy his sister's life at the same time. I looked at the jury and saw the understanding on their faces. This wasn't about mental health or family problems or anything complicated. This was about a selfish, cruel person who murdered someone to save himself and tried to ruin me because he resented my success. The jury looked at Ryan like he was something they'd found stuck to their shoe. Nadia stood for closing arguments. She walked the jury through every piece of evidence: the spoofed text messages, the planted hair, the transferred fingerprints, the fake drawings on my desk, the storage unit rented under a fake name, the timeline proving I was at work when Bastian died. She reminded them that Ryan watched me get arrested. He listened to me scream that I didn't do it. He heard my parents crying downstairs, and he said nothing. He let it happen. He wanted it to happen. She told the jury that someone who can plan this carefully, who can execute it this perfectly, who can watch his own sister get dragged away in handcuffs and feel no remorse, deserves the maximum sentence the law allows. She asked them to give Bastian's family justice. She asked them to protect society from someone this dangerous. She asked them to hold Ryan accountable for what he did. Maximus stood up for his closing argument. He talked about family bonds and how Ryan grew up feeling less than me. He mentioned mental health treatment and rehabilitation. He said Ryan was sick and needed help, not punishment. He tried to make the jury feel sorry for Ryan. But his words sounded empty after everything we'd heard. After Colton's testimony about Bastian buying school supplies for kids. After seeing Ryan's detailed planning notebook. After learning he killed someone to avoid fraud charges. The jury sat with blank faces. Nobody looked moved by what Maximus was saying. He was trying to sell them something they weren't buying. The judge sent the jury to deliberate. Troy led me to a victim waiting room down the hall. Raymond and Marie came with us. Alina showed up 10 minutes later with coffee for everyone. Bastian's parents arrived with Colton. We all sat in uncomfortable chairs under harsh lights and waited. 6 hours. That's how long the jury stayed out. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? We were all anxious, all hoping for the same thing. But there was something nice about being together. These people who Ryan had hurt in different ways. Bastian's family lost their son. I almost lost my freedom. We were connected now through Ryan's actions. Troy kept checking his phone for updates. Marie held my hand. Raymond made bad jokes to break the tension. Alina brought more coffee. Colton paced the small room. His parents sat close together, holding each other. We waited. The bailiff came to get us. My whole body started shaking. I couldn't control it. My hands trembled. My legs felt weak. Marie had to help me stand up and walk back to the courtroom. We filed in and took our seats. The judge entered. We all stood. The jury filed in and I tried to read their faces but couldn't. The foreperson handed the verdict form to the bailiff who gave it to the judge. The judge read it silently, then handed it back. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The foreperson stood. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, evidence tampering, filing false reports, guilty, guilty, guilty. Bastian's mother made a sound like all the air left her body at once. She collapsed forward and her husband caught her. They held each other and cried. Relief and grief mixed together. Their son was dead and nothing would bring him back. But at least his killer would pay for what he did. Colton looked across the courtroom at me. His eyes were wet. He mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded. This wasn't just about me healing from what Ryan did. This was about Bastian's family getting justice. About making sure Ryan faced consequences for taking their son away. I felt something shift inside me. Testifying was the right choice. Ryan's face didn't change. The bailiff put handcuffs on him and led him toward the side door. He looked straight ahead. No emotion, no reaction, just blank. I watched him go and felt nothing. No happiness that he was convicted. No sadness that my brother was going to prison. Just emptiness where my brother used to be. That person who gave me the Sims for my birthday and asked me to make characters of people we knew. That person who borrowed my hairbrush for his Halloween costume. That person never existed. Or maybe he did, and I just never saw who he really was underneath. Movement caught my eye near the back of the courtroom. Mom and Dad stood up to leave. I hadn't known they were there. Mom's face was red and puffy from crying. Dad stared at the floor. They walked up the aisle toward the exit. They had to pass right by where I was sitting. I looked at them. Mom looked at me. For a second, I thought maybe she would say something. Apologize. Acknowledge what just happened. But she turned her head away. Dad wouldn't even look in my direction. They walked past me like I wasn't there. Like I was invisible. They left the courtroom and I sat there watching them go. That night, Troy picked me up from Nadia's office and drove me to a restaurant across town. His whole family was already there when we arrived. Raymond and Marie waved from a booth near the back. Nadia stood up and hugged me when I got to the table. Alina showed up 10 minutes later, sliding into the seat next to Marie. Nobody talked about the verdict at first. We ordered food and Raymond told a story about his history teacher who thought Alaska was an island. Marie laughed so hard she snorted, which made everyone else laugh. Troy ordered appetizers for the table and kept making sure I had enough water. The food came and we ate, and it felt normal in a way nothing had felt normal in months. Not celebrating exactly, more like we were all breathing out at the same time after holding our breath for too long. Raymond finished his burger and looked at me across the table. He said something about me being part of their family now. I waited for Nadia to correct him, to say something polite about how I was just a witness in a case. She didn't. She just smiled and asked if anyone wanted dessert. I ordered chocolate cake and shared it with Marie. We stayed at the restaurant for 2 more hours, talking about nothing important. Movies we wanted to see. Books Raymond had to read for school. Marie's volleyball tournament next month. Normal things. Safe things. When we finally left, Nadia walked me to my car and asked if I was okay. I told her I was. She said to call if I needed anything. I drove home and slept for 6 hours straight without waking up once. 2 days later, Nadia called and said she had something for me at her office. I drove over during my lunch break. The receptionist sent me straight back. Nadia was sitting at her desk with an envelope in front of her. She said it came through their office mail system. My mother's handwriting on the front. Nadia asked if I wanted her to read it first. I said no. I took the envelope and opened it right there. 3 pages. My mother's handwriting covered every line. I started reading and felt my stomach drop. Not an apology. Not even close. She wrote about how I destroyed Ryan's life. How I tore the family apart by testifying. How I would regret this when I got older and understood what family really meant. She said I was selfish. Said I cared more about revenge than about my own brother. Said I should be ashamed of myself for putting him in prison. Every word felt like a slap. I read all 3 pages standing in Nadia's office. My hands shook by the time I finished. Nadia watched my face and asked if I was okay. I wasn't. I folded the letter back up and put it in my purse. I thanked her and left. I drove straight to Ria's office even though I didn't have an appointment. Her receptionist said she was with another client, but Ria came out when she heard I was there. She took one look at my face and cleared her schedule for the next hour. I sat in Ria's office and pulled out the letter. She read it while I stared at the wall. When she finished, she put it down on the table between us. She asked how I felt. I told her I felt like my mother would never see me. Never understand what Ryan did. Never apologize. Ria nodded and said my mother's inability to accept reality wasn't my fault. Wasn't my problem. She asked what I wanted to do with the letter. I picked it up and looked at it. 3 pages of my mother telling me I was wrong. That I should have protected Ryan. That family meant covering for each other no matter what. I started tearing it. Small pieces at first, then smaller. I ripped every page into tiny bits until they covered Ria's desk like confetti. She handed me her trash can and I swept all the pieces into it. Gone. Ria asked how I felt now. I said lighter. She smiled and said that was good. We spent the rest of the hour talking about boundaries and how I didn't owe my mother anything. Not forgiveness, not understanding, not another chance. By the time I left, I felt like I could breathe again. The next week, Nadia called about the sentencing hearing. 3 weeks away. She asked if I wanted to give a victim impact statement. I sat on my couch holding the phone and didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure I had anything left to say. I'd already testified. Already told the jury everything Ryan did. Nadia said what I needed the court to hear. Not for them. For me. I told her I'd think about it. She said, take your time. The hearing was 3 weeks out. I had time to decide. I spent those 3 weeks writing. I'd start a statement and hate it and throw it away. Start over. Try again. I wanted to explain what Ryan did to me without sounding weak. Without sounding broken. I wrote about the arrest, and it sounded pathetic. I wrote about my PTSD, and it sounded like I was asking for pity. I wrote about losing my job and my boyfriend, and it sounded like I was making excuses. Nothing felt right. I brought my attempts to therapy, and Ria read through them. She helped me find the balance. Honest about the pain, but strong about surviving it. She said I didn't need to hide what Ryan did to me. The trauma was real. Acknowledging it wasn't weakness. By the end of the 3 weeks, I had something I could read out loud without my voice shaking. Something that felt true. The sentencing hearing was in the same courtroom where the trial happened. I got there early with Troy. The courtroom filled up fast. Bastian's parents sat in the front row. His dad held his mom's hand. Colton sat next to them, wearing a dark suit. My parents were there too, sitting on Ryan's side of the room. I didn't look at them. The judge came in, and we all stood. Ryan was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He sat at the defense table next to Maximus and didn't look around. The judge asked if anyone wanted to speak before sentencing. Bastian's parents went first. His mother walked to the podium shaking. She talked about the hole in their lives where their son should be. How they'd never see him graduate or get married or have kids. How Ryan took away every future moment they should have had. She cried while she talked, and her husband had to help her back to her seat. Bastian's dad spoke next, shorter, angrier. He said Ryan didn't just kill their son, he killed their family's future. Everything they'd planned, everything they'd hoped for. Gone. Colton went last. He read from a paper in his hands. He talked about losing his brother and best friend. How Ryan didn't just take Bastian's life, he took Colton's future too. All the moments they should have shared, all the years they should have had together. His voice broke at the end and he had to stop reading. He folded the paper and walked back to his seat. The judge looked at me and asked if I wanted to speak. I stood up and walked to the podium. My statement was in my hands. I looked at Ryan sitting at the defense table. He stared straight ahead. I started reading. I told him he didn't just try to frame me for murder. He killed my ability to trust anyone. He destroyed my relationship with our parents. He made me afraid in my own life. Every knock on the door sent me into a panic. Every stranger made me wonder if they thought I was a killer. He took away my sense of safety and replaced it with constant fear. I kept reading. My voice stayed steady. I told Ryan I used to think we were close. I thought he was my brother who cared about me. But now I understood he never loved me at all. I was just someone he resented. Someone whose success made him feel small. My good grades, my scholarships, the attention from our parents. He hated all of it. Hated me for having it. And he was willing to murder an innocent person just to hurt me. Just to watch me lose everything. I looked up from my paper and stared right at him. He still wouldn't look at me. I read the last part of my statement slowly. I said I wasn't asking the judge for any particular sentence. That wasn't my job. I was just asking that Ryan never be able to hurt anyone else the way he hurt Bastian and me, that he never get the chance to plan another person's destruction, to steal another person's life. I folded my paper and looked at Ryan one more time. I said he wasn't my brother anymore. Not really. He was just the person who tried to destroy me and failed. Then I walked back to my seat. The judge shuffled some papers on his bench. He looked at Ryan and started reading the sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole for Bastian's murder. Additional consecutive sentences for the evidence tampering, for the false reports, for everything he did to frame me. The harshest sentence possible. Every word the judge said added more years, more consequences. Ryan would die in prison. He would never walk free, never have another chance to hurt someone. I sat in my seat listening to the judge read the sentence and felt something lift off my chest. A weight I'd been carrying since the SWAT raid, since the arrest, since I learned what Ryan did. It lifted and floated away, and I could breathe deeper than I had in months. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us like angry bees. Cameras flashed in my face. Microphones pushed toward me. Someone yelled about how I felt seeing my brother sentenced. Another asked if I'd ever forgive him. Nadia stepped in front of me and started handling the questions. Her voice stayed calm and professional while she talked about justice being served and the legal process working correctly. Troy put his arm around my shoulders and guided me through the crowd. He kept his other hand out like a shield, blocking cameras and pushing back reporters who got too close. Bastian's parents walked next to us with Colton on their other side. The crowd followed us all the way to the parking garage. Nadia kept talking to them while we walked. She answered their questions without saying anything that could hurt the case or make things worse. We finally made it through the garage entrance, and the reporters had to stay outside. The noise of their voices echoed off the concrete walls and then faded as we walked deeper into the garage. My legs felt shaky. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Colton turned around and pulled me into a tight hug. He smelled like coffee and laundry detergent. His arms squeezed me so hard I could barely breathe. He said we did it. We got him. His voice cracked when he said it. I hugged him back and felt tears on my face, but I didn't know if they were his or mine. Bastian's mom hugged me next. Then his dad. Then Troy. We all stood there in that parking garage hugging and crying while Nadia talked on her phone to someone from her office. The concrete was cold and gray, but it felt safer than anywhere else in the world right then. That night, I went home to my apartment and fell into bed without even changing clothes. I slept for 12 hours straight. No nightmares. No waking up in a panic. No checking the locks on my door 5 times before I could relax. I just slept. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through my window and I felt different. Lighter somehow. Like someone had taken a heavy backpack off my shoulders that I'd been carrying. So long I forgot it was there. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and realized I was thinking about my future. Not about the trial. Not about Ryan. Not about everything that happened. Just about what I wanted to do next. What kind of job I might want. Where I might want to live. Normal things that normal people think about. I got up and made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, and the apartment felt peaceful instead of like a place I was hiding. My phone had messages from Troy and Nadia and Alina checking on me. I texted them back that I was okay. And I actually meant it. 2 weeks after sentencing, my former boss called me. Her name showed up on my phone and I almost didn't answer because I figured it was a pocket dial or something. But I picked up and she asked if we could meet for coffee. She said she wanted to apologize in person. We met at a cafe near my old office. She looked uncomfortable when I sat down across from her. She ordered us both lattes and then spent 5 minutes stirring sugar into hers before she finally started talking. She said she acted hastily in firing me. That she panicked when she saw my face in the newspaper, that she should have waited for the facts instead of assuming I was guilty. She said she wanted to make it right. Then she offered me my old job back. Same position, same pay, plus back pay for the months I'd been gone. I listened to her talk and realized I didn't want it. Not because I was mad at her. I was. But mostly because I didn't want to go back to that life. To that version of myself who existed before everything happened. I thanked her for the apology and told her I accepted it. But I said I was going to do something different with my life. She looked surprised, then relieved. Like maybe she'd been hoping I'd say no. We finished our coffee and parted ways, and I felt good about the decision. I enrolled in community college classes to become a victim advocate like Troy. The application process was simple. I just had to fill out some forms and write a short essay about why I wanted to help people. I wrote about what Troy did for me during the trial, how he made me feel heard and supported when my own family wouldn't, how I wanted to do that for other people going through the legal system. The acceptance letter came 2 weeks later. Classes started in January. Troy offered to mentor me when I told him. He said he'd teach me everything he knew about working with victims and navigating the court system. Nadia said she'd write me a recommendation letter for any program I wanted. She said I had first-hand experience that would make me better at the job than most people with fancy degrees. I started reading books about trauma recovery and victim rights. I took notes. I felt like I had a purpose again. Something bigger than just surviving what Ryan did to me. 3 months after the trial, I moved into a new apartment. Bigger, brighter, in a better neighborhood where I didn't jump every time I heard footsteps in the hallway. Alina helped me move. She showed up with her car, and we loaded boxes and furniture and drove them across town. The Larson family brought pizza for lunch. Nadia and Troy and Raymond and Marie all came. We ate on the floor of my empty living room because I didn't have furniture yet. Raymond joked that I was the cool older sister he never had. Marie said my new place had good energy. Troy helped me hang curtains. Nadia assembled my bookshelf. We worked all afternoon, and by evening the apartment actually looked like a home. They left around 8, and I sat on my new couch in my new living room and felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Safe. Actually safe. Not just pretending, not just hoping. Really truly safe in my own space. I kept seeing Ria for therapy, but our sessions changed. We weren't processing my past anymore. We were building my future. She asked me about my goals, about what kind of life I wanted, about relationships and career and where I saw myself in 5 years. The PTSD was getting better. I still had bad days. Days when a loud noise sent me into a panic. Days when I couldn't stop thinking about the SWAT raid. But they happened less often. Maybe once a week instead of every day. And I had tools to manage them when they came. Breathing exercises, grounding techniques, ways to calm myself down instead of spiraling. Ria said I was doing the work. That healing wasn't linear. That setbacks were normal. But overall I was moving forward. And she was right. I could feel it. My parents sent one final letter through their lawyer. It came in a big envelope with the law firm's return address. Inside was a handwritten note from Mom asking me to visit Ryan in prison. She said he was still my brother. That family was forever. That I needed to forgive him, so we could all move forward. I read it once. Then I called Nadia. She drafted a response for me on her law firm letterhead. It said I had no brother. That Ryan stopped being my family when he murdered an innocent man to frame me. That any further contact attempts would be considered harassment, and I would pursue a restraining order. Nadia sent it to their lawyer. I never heard from them again. 6 months after the trial, Bastian's family invited me to a memorial service. They were holding it on what would have been his birthday. The service was at a park where Bastian used to volunteer. There were maybe 50 people there. His parents, Colton, extended family, and a bunch of teenagers who Bastian had mentored through a youth program. One by one, the kids stood up and talked about him, about how he helped them with homework, listened to their problems, showed up to their games and concerts, made them feel like they mattered. I sat there listening and realized I'd never really known Bastian. I'd thought of him as Ryan's friend, as the victim in my brother's crime. But he was a real person who touched all these lives, who made a difference, who had dreams and plans and people who loved him. Ryan didn't just take his life, he took all the future good Bastian would have done in the world, all the kids he would have helped, all the love he would have given. The weight of that hit me hard. At the memorial, Colton introduced me to people. He put his arm around my shoulders and said this was the woman who made sure Bastian got justice. People thanked me, hugged me, told me how grateful they were that I testified. And instead of feeling like a victim, I felt proud. I stood up in court. I told the truth. I helped put a murderer away for life. Not just for me, for Bastian, for his family, for everyone Ryan hurt. One of the teenagers asked me what it was like to testify. I told her it was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but also the most important. She said she wanted to be brave like me when she grew up. I told her she already was. I started volunteering with a local organization that helps people who've been wrongfully accused. The director was a woman named Sandra who'd spent 3 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit. She interviewed me for 2 hours before accepting me as a volunteer. She needed to know I could handle hearing other people's trauma without breaking down, that I could be professional, that I understood the work was about them, not me. I passed her test. Now I spend Tuesday and Thursday evenings at their office answering phones and meeting with clients. Most of them are still fighting their cases, still trying to prove their innocence. I listen to their stories. I connect them with lawyers. I help them fill out paperwork. I sit with them while they cry. The work is hard. Every story reminds me of my own arrest, my own fear, but it's meaningful. I'm good at it. I understand what they're feeling in a way most people can't, and sometimes just having someone believe them makes all the difference. A year passed. One afternoon, I walked into a coffee shop near campus and froze when I saw my ex-boyfriend sitting at a corner table. Alina was with him. She spotted me first and waved me over before I could leave. My ex stood up fast and his chair scraped against the floor. He looked different. Older, maybe. Less sure of himself. Alina grabbed my hand and pulled me into the seat next to her. She held up her left hand and a diamond ring caught the light. They were engaged. She told me about the proposal and how nervous he'd been and how she almost said no because she needed to know he wouldn't run when things got hard. My ex cleared his throat and said he was sorry. Not the quick apology from before, but a real one where he explained that he'd been scared and selfish and he wished he could take it back. He said watching me go through the trial from a distance made him realize what a coward he'd been. I looked at him and felt nothing but relief. If he hadn't left, I wouldn't have found Troy and the Larsons. I wouldn't have learned what real support looked like. I told him I forgave him and meant it. Alina squeezed my hand and asked how I was doing. I told her about my classes, about the volunteer work, about the family I'd built from people who chose to stand by me. We exchanged numbers and she made me promise to come to their wedding. Walking out of that coffee shop, I realized I was genuinely happy. The Larsons invite me to every holiday now. Raymond calls me his bonus sister. Marie texts me memes that make me laugh. Troy still checks in weekly even though the trial ended a year ago. Alina and I meet for coffee every few weeks, and she's become one of my closest friends. The volunteer work fills something in me that was empty before. I help people who are scared and alone, and I understand their fear in a way most people can't. Some days are still hard. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still flinch at loud knocks. But I'm building a life that Ryan tried to destroy. I survived the arrest, the trial, the loss of my biological family. I testified and got justice for Bastian. I found people who actually love me for who I am, not because they have to. I lost my brother and my parents,